What if the most dysfunctional family on television has actually been teaching us how to live better lives for over 25 years? While everyone dismisses Family Guy as nothing more than crude jokes, offensive humour, and random cutaway gags about fighting a giant chicken, this animated family from Quahog, Rhode Island, has been quietly exploring friendship, grief, identity, purpose, and what it actually means to be a decent human being. Seth MacFarlane created this show back in 1999. He was 25 years old. The pilot aired right after Super Bowl 33 and pulled in 22 million viewers on its very first night. Since then, Family Guy has survived 2 cancellations, a resurrection fueled by DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns, and has gone on to produce nearly 450 episodes across more than 2 decades. And buried underneath all the Peter Griffin stupidity, all the Stewie World domination schemes, all the Brian pretending to be smarter than he actually is, there are real lessons about real life that hit different when you actually pay attention to them. Tonight we are going deep. We are pulling apart the episodes, the character arcs, and the moments that most people scroll right past because they were too busy laughing at a Conway Twitty cutaway. Stay for the lesson about Brian keeping a loaded gun in a bank vault. That one will change how you think about depression and purpose forever, and the episode where Meg finally snaps and tells her entire family exactly what she thinks of them. That one is going to sit with you for a while. So settle in, get comfortable, let the Griffins teach you something while you drift off. And if you fall asleep halfway through, that is perfectly fine. They will be here when you come back. Before we get into everything, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. The first lesson we are pulling from Family Guy is one that sets the tone for the entire series, and it comes from the very first episode ever made. Your attitude shapes your reality, even when your reality is a complete disaster of your own making. Death Has a Shadow aired on January 31st, 1999. It was the pilot, the episode that introduced the world to Peter Griffin, a man who works as a safety inspector at the happy-go-lucky toy factory, and who is, by every measurable standard, terrible at his job. The episode opens with a pretty simple setup. Peter wants to go to a stag party. Lois says fine, but you have to promise not to drink. Peter promises. And then Peter does what Peter always does. He breaks that promise immediately. He plays drinking games at the party. He shows up to work the next morning so hungover that he falls asleep at his inspection station. And while he is sleeping, dangerous items start rolling down the assembly line. A butcher knife, razor blades, a porcupine, a toaster with forks jammed inside it, sitting in a pool of water. All of these defective, dangerous products make it into the hands of consumers. The company gets destroyed in the press, and Peter gets fired. Now here is where things get interesting. Peter goes home, and he has a choice. He can tell Lois the truth. He can explain what happened, take responsibility, and figure out a plan together. But Peter does not do that. Peter tells his kids he got fired, but he hides it from Lois. He cannot bring himself to face her disappointment. So he starts looking for new jobs. He tries being a cereal mascot. Fails. He tries being a sneeze guard at a salad bar. Fails. Nothing works. And the whole time, Brian is sitting there telling him to just be honest with his wife. Brian keeps pushing him. Tell Lois. Tell Lois. Tell Lois. But Peter keeps dodging. Then Brian says something that accidentally changes everything. He tells Peter he needs to look out for his family's welfare. And the word welfare sticks in Peter's brain. Not the concept, the literal word. Peter goes down to the welfare office and applies for government assistance. And because this is Family Guy, a processing error creates a weekly check for $150,000. Think about that for a second. Peter went from being too afraid to tell his wife he lost his job to suddenly having more money than he has ever seen in his life. And what does he do with it? He tells Lois he got a massive raise. He starts spending like a maniac. He rents the statue of David. He gets Meg cosmetic surgery. He builds a moat around his house to protect the family from what he calls the Black Night. He is living in a complete fantasy, built entirely on a lie, funded entirely by money he was never supposed to have. But here is the thing about lies and fantasies. They always collapse. Lois finds one of the welfare checks in the mail. She puts the whole thing together in about 2 seconds, and she is furious, not just because Peter lied about getting fired, not just because he committed welfare fraud, but because he did not trust her enough to tell her the truth in the first place. Peter realizes he has to return the money, and his plan for doing this is, honestly, the most Peter Griffin plan imaginable. He loads all the cash into a blimp and flies it over Super Bowl 33, planning to dump the money on the crowd so it goes back to the taxpayers. Brian goes with him, the money falls, and both of them end up in prison. At the trial, things look bad. The judge sentences Peter to 24 months, but Lois shows up, and even though she is angry, even though Peter lied to her and made a complete mess of everything, she stands in front of that courtroom and tells the judge that she loves her husband. She says that no matter what he does, she will always stand by him. The judge, apparently moved by this, decides to send Lois to jail too, since she wants to be with Peter so badly. But then Stewie, who has been quietly working on a mind control device throughout the episode, uses it to force the judge to release Peter and give him his job back. Peter says he has learned his lesson and will never do anything like this again. Then he immediately starts talking about applying for a minority scholarship, filing a sexual harassment suit, and making a disability claim. Because he is Peter Griffin and he will never actually learn. But here is what makes this episode so much more than just a funny pilot. The lesson buried inside all of this chaos is about what happens when you let fear control your decisions. Peter's original problem was tiny. He got fired. That is it. Millions of people get fired every year. It is embarrassing, it is scary, but it is survivable. Especially when you have a wife like Lois who clearly loves you and would have helped figure things out. But Peter was so afraid of looking like a failure that he chose to lie instead of being honest. And that one lie, that single moment of choosing avoidance over truth, created every problem that followed. The welfare fraud, the spending, the blimp, the trial, the prison sentence. All of it traces back to Peter being too scared to say 3 words to his wife. I got fired. We all do this. Maybe not on the scale of blimp-based welfare fraud, but we do it. We avoid difficult conversations because we are afraid of how the other person will react. We hide our failures because we think people will respect us less. We build elaborate structures of lies and half-truths because the momentary comfort of avoidance feels better than the temporary pain of honesty. But the avoidance always costs more. It always does. Peter spent more energy hiding his firing than he ever would have spent just dealing with it. And the beautiful thing about this episode is that Lois proves Peter's fear was wrong the entire time. She was angry, sure, but she still showed up at the courtroom. She still told the judge she loved him. She still stood by him. If Peter had just told her the truth on day 1, they would have figured it out together. None of the welfare checks, none of the blimp nonsense, none of the prison time. Just 2 people dealing with a setback the way adults are supposed to deal with setbacks. The very first episode of Family Guy teaches us that your attitude toward your problems determines the size of those problems. Peter treated a small problem like the end of the world, and it nearly became the end of the world. If he had approached it with honesty and trust in the people who loved him, it would have been a bad week, not a federal crime. This sets the foundation for everything that follows in the series. Peter Griffin is a man who consistently makes his own life harder by refusing to be honest, refusing to be vulnerable, and refusing to trust the people around him. And the show uses that pattern over and over again to teach us that the thing you are most afraid to face is almost never as bad as what happens when you run from it. So the first lesson from Family Guy is simple but brutal. Face your problems when they are small, or they will grow into something you cannot control. Tell the truth even when it is uncomfortable, because the lie will always cost more than the confession ever would have. And trust the people who love you, because they are probably stronger than you're giving them credit for. Now let us move on to a lesson that hits close to home for anyone who has ever tried to be something they are not. And there is another layer to that first episode that most people miss. Stewie, the baby, spends the entire pilot building a mind control device. He is 1 year old and he is already constructing technology that would make the Pentagon jealous. But what is he building it for? Not world domination. Not in this episode, at least. He is building it because he feels powerless. A baby has zero control over his own life. Someone else decides when he eats, when he sleeps, when he gets picked up, and when he gets put down. Stewie's inventions are his way of fighting back against a world that treats him like he does not have a say in his own existence. And in the end, Stewie uses that mind control device to save Peter, to free his father from a prison sentence that Peter created for himself through his own cowardice and bad decisions. The baby who spent the entire episode building a weapon of control uses it as an act of love. He does not do it because he respects Peter. He does it because without Peter the family falls apart. And even at 1 year old, Stewie understands that a broken family is worse than an imperfect one. That dynamic Stewie building weapons that he ultimately uses to protect the people he claims to despise becomes one of the most consistent and emotionally rich threads in the entire series. Every time Stewie says he wants to destroy Lois or conquer the world, remember this. In the very first episode, when it actually mattered, he used his genius to hold the family together. The show returned to this theme of avoidance and consequence. In its second episode, I Never Met the Dead Man, Peter accidentally destroys the town's cable satellite dish while trying to watch television through someone's window instead of paying attention to the road during Meg's driving lesson. He blames the accident on Meg, not because he's malicious, but because taking responsibility in the moment feels harder than deflecting. The entire town of Quahog loses cable television because of Peter's carelessness, and instead of confessing, he lets Meg absorb the hatred of an entire community. People who already did not like Meg now despise her. She becomes even more of an outcast than she already was, all because Peter was too afraid to say, "I did it." Eventually Meg cracks and tells everyone the truth. The town is furious at Peter, but then something interesting happens. Lois convinces the townspeople that life without television might actually be better, that they can focus on real activities, real relationships, real experiences, and the town forgives Peter. Not because he earned it, but because the community found something better in the process of losing something they thought they needed. Peter, freed from television, throws himself into family activities with the same overwhelming energy he brings to everything. He discovers that real life can be more engaging than anything on a screen. He is present with his children. He is active in his community. He finds genuine happiness in connection rather than consumption. And then the cable comes back, the TV gets turned on, and Peter is instantly reabsorbed by the screen. The lesson is painfully relevant. We all know that the things we are addicted to, whether it is social media or streaming or our phones, are keeping us from the relationships and experiences that actually matter. We have all had those moments where the internet goes down or the power goes out, and suddenly we are talking to the people sitting next to us and wondering why we do not do this more often. And then the Wi-Fi comes back and we pick up our devices and slide right back into the pattern. Peter's television addiction in the second episode of Family Guy is a mirror held up to every person who has ever chosen a screen over a conversation. The show told us this in 1999, years before smartphones and social media turned screen addiction into a global epidemic. Peter could not see what was right in front of him because he was always looking at something else. And when the something else was taken away, he discovered that what was right in front of him was better. But the pull of the screen was stronger than the lesson. It always is, unless you make a conscious choice to put the device down. Unless you decide, actively and deliberately, that the person sitting across from you matters more than whatever is happening on the glowing rectangle in your hand. Peter could not make that choice. The question is whether you can. Let us expand on something we touched on earlier, because Brian's college story has a detail that deserves more attention. When Brian is at Brown University, sitting in that exam room, staring at a test he knows he cannot pass, he has a moment of absolute clarity. He realizes that his entire reputation, the image he has carefully constructed over years of quoting authors and correcting grammar and carrying around books he may or may not have actually finished reading, is built on sand. Brian is not stupid. He is genuinely thoughtful. He genuinely cares about literature and ideas. But there is a massive difference between caring about something and being disciplined enough to master it. Brian reads the first chapter of great novels and then talks about them as if he read the whole thing. He starts writing projects and abandons them. He positions himself as an authority on subjects he has only skimmed, and nobody calls him on it because he is articulate enough to make surface-level knowledge sound deep. The exam exposed all of this, not to the world. The teacher did not know Brian cheated. The other students had no idea. The only person who knew the truth was Brian himself. And that is why his decision to take the final exam, honestly, was so significant. He was not proving anything to anyone else. He was proving something to himself. He was answering the question that had been following him for years. Am I the person I pretend to be, or am I just pretending? The answer was painful. He was pretending. His score on that final exam was the honest measure of his actual knowledge, and it was not good enough. But here is what makes Brian's failure a victory. He finally knew. He finally had an accurate picture of where he actually stood instead of where he imagined he stood. And you cannot build anything real on a foundation of lies. Not a career, not a reputation, not a relationship, not a life. You can only build on truth even when the truth is that you are not as far along as you thought. That exam room was Brian's rock bottom, not because he failed, but because he stopped pretending he was somewhere he was not. And rock bottom, as painful as it is, at least gives you solid ground to stand on. The delusion he was living in before that moment was not solid. It was quicksand dressed up as marble, and he was sinking deeper every day. We should also talk about something that happens across multiple episodes, that teaches a lesson the show never explicitly states, but demonstrates over and over again. The drunken clam. Peter, Quagmire, Joe and Cleveland spend more time at that bar than they spend with their families. They drink, they talk, they get into absurd situations. And on the surface, it looks like just another sitcom hangout. The equivalent of Central Perk in Friends or McLaren's in How I Met Your Mother. But the drunken clam serves a deeper function in the show. It is the place where the four men are allowed to be honest, not completely honest, not vulnerably honest, but honest enough. At home, Peter is a father and a husband. He has responsibilities and expectations and a wife who holds him accountable. At the clam, he is just Peter. He can say dumb things without consequences. He can float ridiculous ideas without being shut down. He can exist in a space where nobody expects him to be anything other than what he is. This is why male friendships are so important and so often undervalued. The drunken clam is not about the alcohol. It is about the permission to be imperfect in the company of people who will not judge you for it. Peter, Quagmire, Joe and Cleveland have wildly different lives, completely different problems, and almost nothing in common except the fact that they show up at the same bar at the same time and give each other space to be themselves. Joe is paralysed. He struggles with feelings of inadequacy every day. At the clam, nobody treats him differently. Cleveland is gentle and quiet in a world that rewards aggression. At the clam, his gentleness is accepted. Quagmire is, well, Quagmire. And at the clam, his friends tolerate his excesses because they understand that beneath the surface, he is just as lonely and searching as the rest of them. The lesson the drunken clam teaches us across the entire series is that everyone needs a place where they do not have to perform, a space where the mask can come off, even partially, and the person underneath is accepted without conditions. If you have that place, protect it. If you have those people, appreciate them. Because the bar is not about the bar, it is about the belonging. The second lesson Family Guy teaches us comes from an episode about Brian Griffin, the family dog who walks on two legs, drinks martinis, drives a Prius, and desperately wants the world to take him seriously as an intellectual. And the lesson is this: persistence is not about talent, it is about showing up honestly, even when you know you're going to fail. Brian has always been the character who thinks he is the smartest person in the room. He reads Camus, he quotes philosophy, he constantly corrects other people's grammar. He fancies himself a writer, a thinker, a progressive voice of reason in a house full of idiots. But here is the problem with Brian that the show keeps circling back to. He is a fraud, not completely. He is genuinely more thoughtful than Peter. He does care about literature and ideas, but there is a massive gap between the person Brian presents to the world and the person Brian actually is. And nowhere is that gap more obvious than when he goes back to college. Brian decides to return to Brown University to finish his degree. He dropped out years earlier and has been carrying that failure around with him like a weight. It eats at him because it contradicts the image he has built. How can you be the intellectual in the room when you could not even finish college? So he goes back. And at first, things go badly. His teacher does not like him. The coursework is harder than he remembers. He is older than the other students and feels out of place. But then something happens that changes the trajectory of the whole episode. Brian cheats on a test. He gets a high score. And his teacher, who had been cold and dismissive, suddenly sees Brian as a star student. The teacher tells Brian that his performance inspired him, that he was actually planning to end his own life, and Brian's apparent brilliance gave him a reason to keep going. Now Brian is trapped. He knows he cheated. He knows he did not earn that grade. But if he confesses, this man who was on the verge of suicide might lose hope again. The guilt is suffocating, but so is the responsibility of what his lie accidentally created. This is one of those moments where Family Guy shows you something genuinely complicated about human behaviour. Brian did a bad thing for selfish reasons, and it accidentally produced a good outcome for someone else. Does that make the cheating okay? The show does not answer that directly, which is what makes it so effective. When the final exam comes, Brian has another choice. He can cheat again, pass the class, maintain the illusion, and keep his teacher alive and hopeful. Or he can take the test honestly and face whatever happens. Brian takes the test honestly, and he fails. He does not pass the class, he does not get the degree. His family, in typical Griffin fashion, tells him he probably should have just cheated, but Brian is proud of himself. For the first time in maybe the entire series up to that point, Brian chose integrity over image. He chose to be honest about who he actually was instead of performing a version of himself that other people wanted to see. The lesson here cuts deep because we have all been Brian at some point. We have all inflated our resumes a little, pretended to have read books we have not read, nodded along in conversations about topics we do not understand because we did not want to look stupid. We build these intellectual or professional identities and then spend enormous amounts of energy maintaining them instead of just then admitting what we do not know and doing the work to actually learn. Brian's decision to fail, honestly, is more courageous than any of his philosophical speeches or literary references. Because it is easy to quote Hemingway at a dinner party. It is hard to sit down for a test you know you're going to fail and write your honest answers anyway. Real persistence is not about being the smartest person. It is about being willing to show up as yourself, flaws and all, and accept the results. Brian walked out of that exam without his degree, but with something he had been missing for years: self-respect. And that is the second lesson Family Guy gives us. Shortcuts might get you the grade, but they will never get you the growth. Show up honestly. Do the work. And if you fail, at least you will know that the failure was real, which means the next success will be real too. Speaking of showing up, let us talk about a lesson that comes from one of the more emotionally complicated episodes in the series. And it is about what friendship actually looks like when everything falls apart. The Perfect Castaway is one of those episodes that starts as a goofy adventure and ends up asking some genuinely difficult questions about loyalty, sacrifice, and what we owe the people we love. It starts simply enough. Peter is struggling to catch fish to feed his family, so he decides to go out to a spot called Pelican's Reef on the advice of a salty old fisherman named Seamus. He brings Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland along for the trip, promising free beer. They find the fish they need, but then a hurricane destroys their boat and leaves them stranded at sea. The guys survive by building a raft out of Quagmire's inflatable dolls, which is exactly the kind of detail that makes Family Guy what it is. They are adrift for weeks with no food, no water, and no rescue in sight. Peter gets so desperate that he eats Joe's legs, which Joe cannot feel anyway because he is paralyzed. It is dark, it is absurd, and it sets up the real story. Back in Quahog, everyone assumes Peter and the guys are dead. A memorial service is held. The family is devastated. And Brian, who has been living with the Griffins as their dog, their friend, and the closest thing to a responsible adult in the house, makes a decision. He marries Lois. Now, before you react to that, think about what Brian is actually doing here. The family has lost its provider. Lois is alone with 3 kids. Brian does not marry Lois because he finally gets to act on his long-standing feelings for her. He marries her because the family needs support, and he is the only one in a position to provide it. He gets a job at a Hummer dealership. He steps into the role of father and husband. But here is the crucial detail. He and Lois sleep in separate beds. This is not a romance, it is a rescue mission. Brian gave up his own life, his own identity, as the bachelor intellectual dog who does not answer to anyone, to hold someone else's family together. Nobody asked him to. Nobody expected it. He just did it because he saw a need and he filled it. Months later, Peter and the guys are finally rescued. They come home. And Peter walks into his own house to find that his best friend married his wife. The reunion is exactly as awkward as you would imagine. Peter is angry. Brian is defensive. Lois is caught in the middle. And the whole situation forces everyone to confront some uncomfortable truths about what they owe each other and what loyalty actually means. Peter's anger is understandable. His best friend married his wife. That feels like betrayal no matter how you frame it. But Brian's defense is also understandable. He stepped up when Peter was gone. He sacrificed his own freedom and comfort to make sure Peter's children were fed and cared for. He did the thankless, difficult work that nobody else was willing to do. This is one of those episodes where Family Guy refuses to give you an easy answer. Was Brian right to marry Lois? Was Peter right to be angry? The show lets both truths exist at the same time without trying to resolve the tension cleanly. And that is actually the most honest thing about it. Because real friendship is messy. Real loyalty does not come with instruction manuals. Sometimes the people who show up for you during your worst moments are the ones you end up resenting. Sometimes the sacrifices other people make on your behalf feel less like gifts and more like violations. And sometimes the right thing to do in an impossible situation still ends up hurting everybody involved. The lesson from The Perfect Castaway is that friendship is not tested during the good times. It is tested during the absences. When you disappear, whether by choice or by circumstance, the people who step in to hold your world together are the ones who actually love you, even if how they do it is complicated, even if it creates problems that did not exist before. The willingness to sacrifice your own comfort for someone else's family, with no guarantee of thanks or recognition, is what real friendship looks like. And sometimes recognizing that sacrifice means swallowing your pride and saying thank you instead of demanding an apology. Peter eventually comes around because despite everything, he knows Brian did what he did out of love. Not romantic love, something harder than that. The kind of love that makes you take a job selling cars and raise someone else's kids because it is the right thing to do, and nobody else is going to do it. If you're still watching, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because the next lesson we're getting into is about what happens when you finally get everything you have ever wanted, and it turns out to be the worst thing that could have happened to you. Every creative person alive needs to hear this next lesson, because Family Guy delivered one of the most painfully accurate portrayals of what happens when you let other people destroy your vision because you're too desperate for success to fight back. Brian Griffin fancies himself a writer. This is established early in the series, and it comes back again and again. He has written novels that nobody bought. He has started screenplays that went nowhere. He has talked endlessly about his creative ambitions while producing almost nothing of real value. But in this particular episode, Brian actually has something worth protecting, and he lets it get taken from him. It starts when Stewie finds an old script in the basement that Brian wrote years ago and completely forgot about. The script is called What I Learned on Jefferson Street. Stewie tosses it on the kitchen table. Lois picks it up, reads it, and falls in love with it. She tells Brian this is actually good. You should do something with this. And for once, Brian has a genuine shot at his dream. Brian takes the script to CBS. The executives respond positively. They hold casting sessions, and Elijah Wood auditions for the lead role. Imagine that for a second. Elijah Wood, an actual movie star, wants to be in Brian's show. This is it. This is the moment Brian has been waiting for his entire life. His words, his ideas, his creative vision, brought to life on a major network. But then James Woods walks in. And James Woods plays the lead role in a completely different way. He turns Brian's serious, thoughtful drama into broad comedy. The executives love it. They start making changes. They bring in a live studio audience. They add a chimpanzee. They rename the show Class Holes with an exclamation point. Everything that made Brian's script special gets stripped away, piece by piece, until the show is unrecognizable. Brian objects. He pushes back, but the producers say something that stops him cold. They remind him that this is his show. His name is on it. He has been dreaming of this moment for years, and technically, even in its mutilated form, this is still his dream coming true. A show with his name on it, airing on a major network. Is he really going to walk away from that? Brian does not walk away. He lets it happen. The night the show premieres, the entire Griffin family gathers around the television to watch Brian's masterpiece. What they see instead is a hollow, laugh-tracked, dumbed-down sitcom that has nothing to do with what Brian originally created. The family's horrified. Lois is furious. She tells Brian he needs to stand up for himself. She tells him that letting other people destroy his work is worse than never having the work produced at all. So Brian goes back. He confronts the producers. He demands they return to his original vision. But the producers refuse to budge, and James Woods keeps pushing for even more changes. Brian has had enough. He quits his own show in frustration, and the dream is over. Now, this episode might sound like a simple cautionary tale about Hollywood, but the lesson goes so much deeper than that. Brian's mistake was not that he compromised. Compromise is part of every creative process. Brian's mistake was that he compromised on the thing that made his work matter in the first place. He let fear of losing the opportunity override his commitment to the work itself. And we all do this, not just creative people. Anyone who has ever been in a negotiation where they gave away too much because they were afraid the deal would fall through. Anyone who has stayed in a job that required them to be someone they are not because the paycheck was good. Anyone who has watched their original idea get diluted and homogenized by committee until it became something they did not recognize and did not want their name on. Brian's story is the story of what happens when you want success more than you want integrity. The brutal truth here is that Brian would have been better off with an unproduced masterpiece than a produced piece of garbage. His original script was good. Lois confirmed it, CBS confirmed it, Elijah Wood confirmed it by wanting to be in it. But Brian was so desperate to have something, anything, with his name on it that he let other people turn his something into nothing. Family Guy teaches us that your creative vision, your principles, your standards, those are not obstacles to success. They are the foundation of it. The moment you start letting other people tear down that foundation because they promise you a bigger building, you end up with rubble. And now we come to the lesson that changed everything. Not just for the characters on the show, but for the millions of people watching at home. Because Family Guy did something that no animated comedy had ever really done before. They killed a main character, and they did not bring him back for 2 full episodes. Life of Brian aired as the 6th episode of season 12. And if you were watching Family Guy regularly at that time, nothing could have prepared you for what happened. The episode starts with Stewie and Brian returning from a time travel adventure. They have been jumping through history, getting into trouble, barely escaping. The usual Stewie and Brian road trip chaos. But this time, when they get home, Stewie makes a decision. He is tired of the close calls. He is tired of nearly getting killed every time they mess with the timeline. So he destroys his time machine completely. He takes it to the junkyard and has it crushed into a cube. While they are at the junkyard, they find a street hockey net and decide to bring it home for some exercise. They set it up in front of the house, and as they are putting it together in the street, a car comes out of nowhere and hits Brian. It happens fast. There is no dramatic build-up, no warning, no slow motion, just a car and then Brian on the pavement, broken. The family rushes Brian to the veterinarian, and the scene at the vet's office is unlike anything Family Guy has ever done. There are no jokes, there are no cutaway gags, there is no Conway Twitty. Just a family standing around a table watching someone they love die. Each family member says goodbye. Peter tells Brian he is his best friend. Lois breaks down. Chris and Meg stand there in shock. And then there is Stewie. Stewie, who has travelled through time with Brian, who has shared more adventures and more honest conversations with this dog than anyone else in the family, stands there and watches his best friend die. Brian recovers enough to say one thing. He tells the family he loves them, and then he is gone. The show does not cut to a joke. It does not lighten the mood. It just sits in the silence. Stewie immediately blames himself. If he had not destroyed the time machine, he could go back and save Brian, but the machine is gone. The parts are unavailable. Brian is not coming back. A month passes. The family goes to a pet store and finds a new dog named Vinny. Vinny is a talking Italian dog who is friendly, helpful, and eager to please. He makes dinner for the family. He bonds with Peter at the Drunken Clam. He does everything right, but Stewie cannot accept him. Stewie does not want a replacement. He wants Brian. There is a scene where Vinny finds Stewie crying alone. Vinny sits with him and tells Stewie about losing his own previous owner. He understands what it is like to lose someone you cannot replace. And slowly, carefully, Stewie begins to let Vinny in, not as a replacement for Brian, just as someone who understands what grief feels like. 2 episodes later, in Christmas Guy, Stewie gets his miracle. The family goes to the Christmas carnival. Carter Pewterschmidt cancels it because he hates Christmas. Peter convinces him to bring it back, but none of it makes Stewie happy. When he sits on Santa's lap and Santa asks what he wants for Christmas, Stewie says one word, Brian. Then Stewie spots something. He sees his past self at the mall, buying a toy that he purchased just before Brian died, and he realizes something. His past self still has the time return pad, the one from the time machine he destroyed. If he can get that pad, he can go back and save Brian. With Vinny's help, Stewie steals the return pad from his past self, travels back in time, and pushes Brian out of the way of the car. Brian is alive. Stewie hugs him. The family's whole again. The audience reaction to this 2-episode arc was enormous. Petitions were created to bring Brian back. Social media exploded with anger and grief. People wrote emotional posts about a cartoon dog, and that response tells you something important about what Family Guy had actually built over the years. Brian was not just a character, he was the conscience of the show. He was the one who told Peter when he was being an idiot. He was the one who sat with Stewie during his darkest moments. He was the voice of reason in a house where reason did not usually survive past the first act. The lesson this story teaches is one that everyone needs to hear, but nobody wants to. You do not appreciate the people in your life until they're gone. Not fully, not the way they deserve. The Griffins loved Brian. They knew he mattered. But it took losing him completely to understand exactly how much. And here is the harder truth. In real life, there is no time machine. There is no return pad. There is no going back to push someone out of the way of the car. When you lose someone, that is it. The conversations you did not have, the things you did not say, the time you spent being annoyed by their quirks instead of appreciating their presence, all of that becomes permanent regret. Family Guy gave the Griffins a second chance, a supernatural, science fiction, impossible second chance, and the show knew exactly what it was doing by granting that wish, because it forced every single person watching to ask themselves a question. If you lost someone tomorrow, would you need a time machine to fix things? Or have you already said what needed to be said? Brian's death taught us that gratitude is not something you feel in hindsight. It is something you practice right now, today, with the people who are still here. Because the car comes out of nowhere. It always does. And the junkyard is not going to have the parts you need. That one sits with you. So let it. And when you are ready, we will move on to the next lesson. There is something else about Brian's death that deserves attention. The audience's response. When Life of Brian aired in November 2013, the reaction was unlike anything an animated series had ever generated. Petitions appeared online demanding Brian's return. Social media was flooded with genuine grief, anger, and disbelief. People who had watched this show for over a decade felt a real sense of loss over a cartoon dog. And that reaction tells you something important about what Brian represented that went beyond his character. Brian was the bridge. He was the character who existed between the absurd world of the show and the real world of the audience. Peter is too stupid to be relatable in a direct way. Stewie is too extraordinary. Meg is too mistreated. Chris is too oblivious. Lois is too patient. But Brian? Brian was the one who noticed the absurdity. He was the one who rolled his eyes when Peter did something insane. He was the one who sat at the bar and talked about life as if he understood what it felt like to be disappointed, restless, and searching for something he could not name. Viewers saw themselves in Brian, not in his pretensions or his drinking or his failed relationships, in his tiredness, in his quiet frustration with a world that never quite matched up to what he thought it should be. Brian was the character who felt like an adult trapped in a show full of children, and for a lot of people watching, that resonated deeply. When the show killed him, it did not just remove a character from the cast. It removed the audience's proxy, the person who saw the madness from their perspective. And for 2 episodes, viewers had to watch Family Guy without the one character who made them feel seen. That discomfort was deliberate. The writers wanted you to feel the absence. They wanted the family's grief to mirror your own. They wanted you to sit in a version of the show that felt wrong, that felt incomplete, that felt like something essential was missing, because that is exactly what grief feels like. When Brian came back in Christmas Guy, the relief was enormous, but the show had already made its point. You did not realise how much Brian mattered until he was gone. And if a cartoon dog can teach you that lesson, imagine what it would feel like to learn it about a real person in your real life. The show also uses Brian's near-permanent death to establish something about Stewie's character that pays off in every subsequent episode. Stewie is willing to break the universe for the people he loves. He destroyed his time machine because he was tired of close calls. He spent weeks trying to rebuild it because he could not accept Brian's death. He stole a device from his own past self, an act that created paradoxes he did not care about, because the only thing that mattered was getting Brian back. This is not casual affection. This is the kind of devotion that burns holes in reality, and it comes from a baby who spends most of his time pretending he does not care about anyone. Stewie's love for Brian is the most genuine thing in the entire show. It is also the most hidden. He buries it under sarcasm and British wit and schemes. But when it matters, when it actually matters, Stewie's love is a force of nature that not even time itself can withstand. And speaking of hidden emotions, let us return to Meg for a moment. Because her story does not end with the hurricane episode. It echoes through the entire series in ways that are easy to miss if you're not paying attention. After Meg's explosion and her decision to resume her role as the family scapegoat, the show continues to use her as the butt of the joke. But every once in a while, in small moments that last only a few seconds, you see the real Meg. The Meg who stood up to her father. The Meg who told the truth about her mother. The Meg who understood the family dynamic better than anyone else in the house. There is an episode where Meg goes to work at a hospital during an internship and shows genuine competence. She helps patients. She makes good decisions under pressure. She saves Peter's life when he's injured. And when it is over, nobody acknowledges what she did. Peter asks for a glass of water instead of saying thank you. There is another episode where Meg gives Chris an inspiring speech about hope. It is genuinely moving. Chris copies it word for word and wins an essay contest. When Meg tries to tell people the speech was hers, nobody believes her. Her contribution is stolen, and she receives nothing. These moments are played for comedy, but they add up to something much sadder. Meg Griffin is the most capable person in the family who receives the least recognition. She is smarter than Chris, more emotionally intelligent than Peter, more resilient than Brian, and more self-aware than Stewie. And the show knows this. It uses her competence and her suffering to create comedy, but in doing so, it accidentally created the most tragic character on the show. The lesson Meg teaches across the entire series, not just in one episode, but in all of them, is that some people's contributions are invisible. They do the work, carry the weight, and hold the structure together, and nobody applauds. If you recognize yourself in Meg, if you're the person whose efforts go unnoticed, whose ideas get attributed to someone else, whose presence is only appreciated when it is absent, know this: the structure depends on you. Even if nobody says it, even if nobody sees it, the fact that things do not fall apart is evidence of your contribution. You do not need a trophy to know that what you do matters. You just need to keep doing it. And if you recognize someone else in Meg, if there is a person in your life who carries more than their share without complaint, say something. A simple thank you, a moment of genuine acknowledgement, costs you nothing and means everything. Peter never thanks Meg. Do not be Peter. There is one more thing that needs to be said about this show before we close. Family Guy has been criticized for decades for being offensive, for being crude, for relying on shock humor, for punching down. And some of that criticism is fair. The show has episodes and jokes that have aged poorly. It has moments that crossed lines that should not have been crossed. Seth MacFarlane himself has acknowledged that the show's willingness to joke about anything means it sometimes jokes about things it should not. But here is what the critics miss. The same show that makes tasteless jokes also produced the Bank Vault episode. The same show that fights a giant chicken for 5 minutes also told a story about a baby who dropped his accent in a therapist's office and admitted he was afraid. The same show that features Peter doing terrible things also showed us what it looks like when a family loses its conscience and has to keep going without him. Family Guy is not one thing. It never has been. It is a show that contains contradictions because it's a show about people, and people are contradictory. Peter is a terrible father who loves his children. Brian is a pretentious fraud who genuinely cares about doing the right thing. Stewie is a would-be villain whose deepest desire is simply to be loved. These contradictions are not flaws in the writing. They are the writing. They are what make these characters feel real, even though they are literally drawings on a screen. 25 years. Nearly 450 episodes, 2 cancellations and 2 resurrections. A show that was supposed to be a cheap Simpsons knockoff that became one of the longest-running animated series in American television history. And through all of it, hidden in the cutaway gags and the chicken fights and the giggities, there have been lessons about what it means to be human, about honesty and fear and love and loss and the masks we wear and the people we would burn the world down to protect. That is not bad for a show about a fat guy from Rhode Island. The next lesson Family Guy teaches us is something that self-help books and motivational speakers almost never get right. And the show delivers it through the most unexpected teacher imaginable: Death himself. In Friends of Peter G., Peter crashes his car and dies. Just like that. No elaborate setup, no warning signs. Peter is driving, he crashes, and suddenly he is standing face to face with the Grim Reaper. Now in Family Guy, Death is a recurring character. He is awkward, a little lonely, and he has shown up at the Griffin house more times than the mailman. But in this episode, Death is not playing around. He tells Peter that before he gets his second chance at life, he needs to see something. Death shows Peter 2 possible futures, 2 completely different versions of what his life could look like. In the first version, Peter is a heavy drinker. Not the lovable goofball who has a few beers at the Drunken Clam with his buddies. A real drinker, an aggressive, abusive, destructive alcoholic who terrorizes his family. This version of Peter screams at Lois. He frightens his children. He breaks things. He is the worst version of himself, with every filter removed and every impulse indulged. The alcohol does not make Peter fun. It makes Peter dangerous. In the second version, Peter is completely sober. 0 alcohol, clean living. And he is the most boring human being who has ever existed. Sober Peter has no personality, no spark, no humour whatsoever. He sits at dinner making bland conversation about weather patterns. His friends cannot stand being around him. Lois looks at him like she's married to a piece of furniture. The man who was the life of every room he walked into has become the reason people leave rooms. Now here is where the lesson lands. Death does not tell Peter that drinking is evil. Death does not tell Peter to get sober. Death tells Peter that the answer is moderation, balance. The key to a good life is not eliminating every vice and becoming a monk, and it is not giving in to every impulse and becoming a monster. It is finding the middle ground where you can enjoy life without destroying it. Peter goes home and starts throwing out half of every pack of beer he buys. Not all of it. Half. It is a small, imperfect, very Peter Griffin solution. But it is the right idea. What makes this episode so smart is that it resists the easy moral. Every other show on television would have made this a straightforward intervention episode. Character drinks too much. Character hits rock bottom. Character gets sober. Character gives a tearful speech about how alcohol ruined their life. The end. Family Guy says no. That is not how real life works. Real life is not about choosing between all or nothing. It is about figuring out how much is enough and how much is too much, and then living somewhere in between. This applies to everything, not just alcohol. Think about how many people destroy their relationships because they work 80 hours a week chasing success. Think about how many people wreck their health because they swing between extreme diets and binge eating. Think about how many people burn out because they oscillate between total obsessive productivity and complete collapse. The pattern is always the same. People treat life like a light switch, on or off, all or nothing, and Death of all characters is the one who points out that the dimmer switch exists for a reason. Balance is not exciting. Nobody writes motivational quotes about moderation. Nobody makes viral posts about throwing out half your beer. But that is exactly why Family Guy's version of this lesson works. It is honest about the fact that perfection is not the goal. Sustainability is the goal. Finding a version of your life that you can actually maintain without destroying yourself or the people around you. That is the real achievement. If you're still with us, make sure you're subscribed and let us get into a lesson that is genuinely one of the most uncomfortable moments in Family Guy history, because we need to talk about what happened when Meg Griffin finally stopped being quiet. There is an episode that takes place during a hurricane. The power is out. The family is trapped inside the house with nowhere to go and nothing to do. And for the first time in over 200 episodes, Meg Griffin opens her mouth and says exactly what she has been thinking for years. To understand why this episode matters, you have to understand what Meg's role has been in this show from the very beginning. Meg is the punching bag. She is the family scapegoat. Peter ignores her. Lois dismisses her. Chris insults her. Even Stewie takes shots at her. The show has made Meg the butt of the jokes so consistently and for so long that it has become part of the DNA of the series. When something bad needs to happen to someone, it happens to Meg. When someone needs to be the target, Meg takes the hit. It is played for laughs, and the audience goes along with it because that is how the show has always worked. But in this episode, the hurricane traps the family together and something snaps inside Meg. She looks at her father and tells him exactly what kind of parent he has been. She looks at her mother and tells her exactly how her favoritism and neglect have shaped Meg's entire life. She tells Chris what she really thinks of him. She holds nothing back. Years of suppressed anger, humiliation, and pain come pouring out in a monologue that silences every single person in the room. And here is the thing, she is right about all of it. Every accusation she makes is supported by hundreds of episodes of evidence. Peter is a terrible father to her. Lois does play favourites. The family does use Meg as an emotional dumping ground. Meg is not exaggerating or being dramatic. She's stating facts that everyone already knows, but nobody has ever had the courage to say out loud. The family is stunned. For the first time, they have no comeback, no joke, no easy dismissal. They are forced to sit in the truth of who they have been to their own daughter. And for a few minutes, it looks like this might be the moment where everything changes, where the Griffins finally confront their dysfunction and start treating Meg like a human being. But then something happens that makes this episode genuinely controversial. Meg takes it all back. She watches the family start to crumble without their scapegoat. Peter and Lois start turning on each other. Chris becomes unstable. The family structure, such as it is, begins to collapse. And Meg realizes something that hits her like a freight train. The family needs someone to blame. They function, poorly but functionally, because all of their dysfunction gets redirected toward one target. Her. Without that target, they turn on each other and everything falls apart. So Meg makes a choice. She goes back to being the punching bag. She absorbs the jokes. She accepts the dismissal. She becomes invisible again. Not because she has forgotten what she said, not because she has forgiven them, but because she understands that the family cannot survive without her in that role, and she loves them too much to let them destroy each other. This is one of the most divisive moments in the entire series. Some people saw it as the show rewarding abuse. Some people saw it as lazy writing, a reset button that allowed the status quo to continue without consequences. But there is another way to read it, and it is the reading that actually teaches you something about real life. Meg's choice is not weakness. It is the most clear-eyed, self-aware decision anyone in the Griffin family has ever made. She sees the system for what it is. She understands her role in it, and she makes a conscious choice to stay in that role, not because she does not know better, but because she has decided that holding the family together matters more than her own comfort. Think about the people in your life who absorb the most stress so that everyone else can function. The parent who never complains. The co-worker who takes on extra work without asking for credit. The friend who always listens to everyone else's problems but never shares their own. These people are not weak. They are load-bearing walls. The structure stands because they hold the weight. Meg Griffin is a load-bearing wall, and this episode is the only time the show acknowledges that truth. When you remove the wall, the ceiling comes down. Meg knows this, and she puts herself back in position, not because she's been broken, but because she has chosen to be strong in a way that nobody around her will ever understand or appreciate. The lesson here is uncomfortable because it does not have a happy ending. In a perfect world, Meg would speak her truth and the family would change. But Family Guy is not interested in perfect worlds. It is interested in the world as it actually is. And in the real world, some people carry more than their share because the alternative is watching everything collapse. The question the episode leaves you with is not whether Meg was right or wrong. It is whether you have a Meg in your life, and whether you have ever once stopped to thank her for holding everything together. That one does not go down easy, but the next lesson we are going to explore goes even deeper, and it takes us to a place Family Guy has only gone once in its entire run. A bank vault, a bottle of scotch, a loaded gun, and the most honest conversation two characters have ever had on this show. If you have watched Family Guy for any length of time, you know that the show follows a formula. There are cutaway gags, there is a main plot and a subplot. There is usually a musical number or a pop culture reference that goes on way too long. Peter does something stupid. Someone yells, "Shut up, Meg," credits roll. But on May 2nd, 2010, the show threw all of that away, every single bit of it. And what it produced was the single most honest, most uncomfortable, and most important episode in the history of the series. Brian and Stewie. Season 8, Episode 17. The 150th episode. And it is unlike anything the show has ever done before or since. The setup is almost ridiculously simple. Brian goes to the bank to deposit money in his safe deposit box. Stewie tags along because he needs to return an expensive sweater to a nearby store. They are inside the vault when the automatic timer kicks in and the door closes, locking them inside for the entire weekend. That is it. That is the entire premise. Two characters, one room, no escape, no other characters appear. There are no cutaway gags. There is no background music. There is no subplot about Peter trying to start a business or Chris falling in love with the wrong girl. For 30 minutes, it is just Brian and Stewie, trapped together, forced to actually talk to each other without anywhere to hide. The first half of the episode is intentionally uncomfortable. Stewie soils his diaper when the vault door closes and panics about getting a rash. What follows is a series of escalating degradations that test the limits of what Brian is willing to do. It is gross, it is deliberately unpleasant, and it serves a very specific purpose. The show is stripping away every layer of dignity, every defense mechanism, every pretense, until both characters are completely exposed. You cannot maintain your carefully constructed persona when you're at your most vulnerable and there is nowhere to run. They discover Stewie has a cell phone with barely any battery left. One call, one chance to call for help, and Stewie uses the last of the battery charge to call the clothing store about his sweater return instead of calling for help. Brian slaps him. Brian screams at him. Stewie starts crying, and in the aftermath of that small act of violence, something shifts between them. The walls come down. Brian finds a bottle of scotch in his deposit box. He offers Stewie a sip. They get drunk together. And drunk Brian and drunk Stewie start talking the way people only talk when they have given up on maintaining appearances. Stewie asks Brian to pierce his ear. Brian agrees. It goes wrong. There is blood. They keep drinking. They talk about things they have never talked about before. Brian admits he voted for John McCain, which shocks Stewie. They discuss whether the dog whisperer is legitimate. They argue, they laugh, they insult each other. And then, as the alcohol wears off and the morning comes, the conversation takes a turn that nobody watching was prepared for. Stewie notices something in Brian's deposit box, a gun, a revolver, and Stewie asks the question that changes everything. Why do you have a gun? Brian does not answer at first. He deflects. He changes the subject. But Stewie will not let it go. He points out something that makes the question even more urgent. Brian is a vocal advocate for gun control. He has argued passionately against firearms on multiple occasions. He cried after the Columbine massacre. He is the last person on Earth who should own a gun. So why does he have one locked in a bank vault? Brian finally answers. And when he does, the room goes silent. Brian tells Stewie that he keeps the gun in case he ever wants to kill himself. Not as a figure of speech, not as a dark joke. Brian tells Stewie, with complete sincerity, that he has considered ending his own life, that the gun is there as an option, a way out, whenever things get bad enough that he cannot see a reason to continue. The scotch in the deposit box was meant to be his last drink. He explains why. Brian is an anthropomorphic dog. He walks on two legs. He talks. He reads books and has opinions and falls in love with women who can never fully love him back. But he is not human. He will never be human. And he is not really a dog anymore either. He exists in a space between two worlds, belonging fully to neither one. Other dogs have a clear purpose. They protect, they comfort. They live in the moment. Brian cannot do that because he has a human mind trapped in a dog's body. And humans need purpose, meaning, a reason to get up in the morning. Brian has been searching for that reason for years and has never found it. The gun is his insurance policy, not for today, not for tomorrow, but for the day when the search for meaning finally becomes too exhausting to continue. Stewie's reaction is not what you would expect from a baby who has spent the entire series threatening world domination and building weapons of mass destruction. Stewie does not make a joke. He does not dismiss it. He does not try to fix it with logic or argument. Instead, Stewie gets angry. Not at Brian. At the idea of losing Brian. Stewie tells Brian that he would be lost without him. That Brian is the only person in the entire world that Stewie genuinely cares about. He says that his earlier insults, the things he said while they were fighting, were just retaliation. They were not real. What is real is that Stewie needs Brian. That Brian gives Stewie's life a purpose that nothing else provides. And then Stewie says something that lands like a hammer. He says that maybe making someone else happy is enough. Maybe that is the purpose Brian has been searching for. Not some grand literary achievement. Not some philosophical breakthrough. Not fame or recognition or romantic love. Just being present for one person who needs you. Brian absorbs this. He does not argue. He does not deflect. For the first time in the episode, maybe for the first time in the series, Brian just listens, and something in him softens. Stewie asks Brian to read to him. Brian picks up a copy of David Copperfield and begins reading the opening lines as Stewie falls asleep in the vault. The camera holds on this image, a dog reading a book to a baby in a bank vault. Without music, without jokes, without interruptions. Just two characters who have spent the last 30 minutes tearing each other apart, now sitting together in the quietest, most tender moment the show has ever produced. The next morning, the vault door opens. Brian picks up Stewie, who is still sleeping, and carries him out. No dialogue, no final joke, just Brian, holding the person who gave him a reason to keep the gun in the deposit box instead of using it. This episode was performed entirely by Seth MacFarlane, who voices both Brian and Stewie, which means that for 30 minutes, this was essentially one man in a recording booth having a conversation with himself about depression, purpose, suicide, and what it means to find a reason to live. Producer Cara Vallo has said the episode was directly inspired by the All in the Family, episode 2's A Crowd, where Archie and Mike get locked in a storeroom and reveal their deepest secrets. And the David Copperfield reference connects to a Twilight Zone episode called Time Enough at Last, where a man reads the same book inside a bank vault. The layers are intentional. The craftsmanship is deliberate. This was not a gag. This was the show telling you who it really is when nobody is laughing. The lesson from this episode is the most important one Family Guy has ever delivered. Purpose does not have to be extraordinary. It does not have to be a best-selling novel or a successful career or some grand idea. that nobody has ever thought of before. Sometimes, purpose is as simple as being the person who shows up for someone else. Sometimes, the reason to keep going is that there is one person in the world who would be lost without you. And sometimes admitting that you're struggling, that you're tired, that you have thought about giving up, is not weakness. It is the first step toward finding the connection that saves your life. Brian's gun stayed in the deposit box, not because his problems were solved, not because he suddenly found meaning in some grand cosmic sense, but because a baby who builds death rays told him the truth. You matter to me, and that was enough. If you or someone you know is going through a difficult time, reaching out to a professional or a trusted person in your life can make all the difference. You do not have to figure it out alone. That was heavy. Let it settle, and when you are ready, we will keep going, because Family Guy still has more to teach us. The next lesson Family Guy teaches us is about what happens when your worst secret gets dragged into the light, and more importantly, what you do after everyone knows. Lois Griffin has always been the responsible one, the one who holds the family together while Peter burns everything down around her. She manages the house, raises the kids with virtually no help, and somehow keeps her marriage intact despite the fact that her husband once created his own country in their backyard. Lois is the adult in a house full of children, regardless of their actual age. But Lois has a past, and in the episode And I'm Joyce Kinney, that past catches up to her in the worst possible way. It starts innocently enough. Lois bumps into Joyce Kinney, a local news anchor, at a store. They hit it off. Joyce invites Lois to the studio, takes her out for drinks, and they start building what looks like a genuine friendship. Lois is thrilled. She does not have many friends outside the family, and Joyce seems smart, fun, and interested in Lois as a person. But Joyce has an agenda, and Lois walks right into it. After getting Lois drunk, Joyce casually steers the conversation toward college memories. Lois, loosened up and trusting, admits something she's kept hidden for years. She made an adult film in college. The title was Quest for Fur, and Joyce, being a news anchor with access to a broadcast platform, puts the entire story on the evening news. Lois wakes up the next morning to discover that her secret is public. Everyone in Quahog knows. Her neighbours, her church community, the parents at her kids' school. The life she carefully constructed as a respectable wife and mother is crumbling because of something she did decades ago when she was a completely different person. When Lois confronts Joyce, she finds out the truth. This was not random. Joyce targeted Lois specifically because of a prank Lois pulled in high school that humiliated Joyce and apparently stuck with her for years. This was revenge, calculated and patient, disguised as friendship. Lois is devastated. She confesses to her family. She tries to go to church but finds herself ostracized. People who smiled at her last week now cross the street to avoid her. Her entire social world contracts overnight. And the worst part is that she cannot undo any of it. The information is out. It is public. Everyone knows. Brian gives her the advice that changes everything. He tells her to stop running from it and confront it head on. Lois goes to church. She stands in front of the entire congregation, the same people who have been whispering about her and avoiding her. And she does not apologize. She does not beg for forgiveness. Instead, she compares herself to Mary Magdalene, a woman from the Bible who had a complicated past but was still worthy of grace. And then, in a move that is pure Lois Griffin, she shows the film to the entire congregation. The congregation accepts her, not because the film was not embarrassing, not because her past did not matter, but because by owning it completely, by refusing to be ashamed of who she was, Lois took away the only weapon anyone had against her. The secret. The power of a secret comes from the hiding. Once you stop hiding, the power evaporates. This lesson is especially relevant right now. We live in a world where people's pasts get dug up constantly. Old social media posts surface, college photos appear, Things you said or did 10 or 20 years ago get held against the person you are today. And the instinct, the very human instinct, is to deny, deflect and hide. To hope it goes away, to pray that nobody finds the receipts. But Lois teaches us that the hiding is worse than the truth. When you own your past, when you say, yes, I did that, and I am still standing here, you rob the accusation of its sting. People do not respect denial. They do not respect deflection. But they do respect someone who can look the world in the eye and say, this is who I was, and this is who I am now, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. The lesson is clear. Secrets are only weapons when you treat them like secrets. The moment you own your story, nobody else can use it against you. Lois could have spent the rest of her life hiding from Joyce Kinney's broadcast. Instead, she walked into a church and made her past her own, and the people who mattered stayed. If you are still with us, be sure to subscribe, and let us move on to a lesson about what success does to the people closest to you. Peter Griffin and Glenn Quagmire are not the first people you think of when you imagine a musical duo. Peter is tone deaf in most episodes, and Quagmire's interests tend to run in very different directions than songwriting. But in Harmony's way, the show gives these two an unexpected gift. They discover completely by accident that they can sing in perfect harmony together. It happens because of a bee, literally. A bee stings one of them while they're hanging out. They both yell at the same time and their voices lock into this beautiful, harmonic tone. It is an absurd setup, but the result is genuine. Peter and Quagmire can make something beautiful when they work together. They sit down to write songs. They go to Mort's pharmacy to get paper. And Mort, who apparently had a past career in music, becomes their manager. He books them at the library during open mic night. Their performance clears the room, which seems like a disaster. But Mort has put the show on what he calls YouTube, and they go viral. An invitation to perform at a music festival follows. Their performance is a hit, a real legitimate hit. They get offered professional management, which means dumping Mort, and they go on tour. Lois objects. She can see where this is heading. But Peter and Quagmire are riding the wave, and then the wave starts to turn. Success changes Peter. Not slowly, almost immediately. He starts making decisions for both of them without consulting Quagmire. He starts acting like the star of the duo, the leader, the one whose vision matters. Life on the road becomes stressful. The fun that brought them together in the first place disappears under the weight of Peter's ego and the pressure of professional expectations. They get booked on Conan. This should be the pinnacle. National television, millions of viewers, the biggest stage they have ever been on. But during the appearance, Quagmire has had enough. He walks off the stage, just gets up and leaves. The partnership is over. Peter comes home. He is humiliated and confused. He does not understand what went wrong. In his mind, everything was going perfectly. They were famous, they were making money, they were on television. What more could Quagmire possibly want? What Quagmire wanted was what they had in the beginning. Two friends making music together for the joy of it, without managers or tours or ego, just the pure, simple pleasure of creating something with someone you care about. Peter could not see that because success had blinded him to the thing that made the success possible in the first place. Peter begs for forgiveness. He sings to Quagmire, and Quagmire, because he's Peter's friend, and because friendship is more important than pride, forgives him. They go back to being Peter and Quagmire. No more tours, no more television appearances, just two guys who discovered they sound good together and choose to keep that discovery between friends. The lesson here is one that destroys more relationships than any betrayal or argument ever could. Success does not ruin people. How people handle success ruins people. When Peter and Quagmire were equals, making music because it felt good, everything worked. The harmony was not just in their voices, it was in their partnership. Two people contributing equally, respecting each other's role, creating something neither could create alone. The moment Peter started treating the partnership Like a hierarchy, with himself at the top, the harmony died. You cannot sing in unison with someone when you're trying to be louder than them. You cannot create together when one person is making all the decisions. The music suffered because the friendship suffered, and the friendship suffered because Peter forgot that Quagmire was not his backup singer. He was his partner. We see this everywhere. Business partners who build something incredible together and then tear it apart, fighting over control. Bands that produce legendary albums and then implode because one member's ego outgrows the studio. Friendships that survive poverty but cannot survive success because the money changes the power dynamic. Family Guy teaches us that the best collaborations are not the ones where one person leads and everyone else follows. They are the ones where everyone contributes and nobody keeps score. Peter and Quagmire's harmony was beautiful precisely because it required both of them in equal measure. The moment one voice tried to dominate, the song fell apart. Protect the people who harmonize with you. Do not let your ego turn their contribution into background noise, because the music you make together is always better than the solo you could play alone. Now we are getting into territory that Family Guy does not visit often, but when it does, it hits harder than any cutaway gag ever could. The next lesson is about something that millions of people deal with every single day, but almost never talk about. Family trauma, and how the patterns that hurt you as a child follow you straight into adulthood, whether you realize it or not. In Peter's Sister, we learn something about Peter Griffin that reframes almost everything about his character. Peter has a sister, and she's not just difficult or annoying or overbearing in the way that sitcom siblings usually are. She is abusive, physically, emotionally, and without apology. The episode takes place around Thanksgiving. Lois is already frustrated because nobody in the family helps with the holiday preparation. She's doing everything herself, while Peter and the kids treat her like a combination of a cook and a maid. But the real story begins when Peter's sister arrives. From the moment she walks through the door, the dynamic changes. Peter, a man who is usually the loudest, most confident person in any room, becomes small. He becomes quiet. He flinches. You can see it in the way the show draws him. His posture changes, his voice gets softer. He stops being Peter Griffin and starts being the little brother who spent his childhood being terrorized by someone bigger and meaner than him. His sister dominates every interaction. She humiliates Peter in front of his family. She belittles him. She physically intimidates him, and Peter takes it. The man who once fought a giant chicken through an entire city takes it from his sister because the fear was programmed into him decades ago, long before he ever moved to Quahog or married Lois or had children. The family watches this happen. Lois sees it. The kids see it, and for the first time, they start to understand something about Peter that explains a lot of his behaviour over the years. Peter's clownishness, his constant need for attention, his inability to take anything seriously, his desperate desire to be liked by everyone he meets. These are not just character traits, they are coping mechanisms, strategies he developed as a child to survive life with someone who made him feel small every single day. The episode builds to a confrontation. Peter, pushed past his breaking point, finally stands up to his sister. They end up in a wrestling match. It is physical and raw and uncomfortable in a way that Family Guy rarely allows itself to be. Peter is not fighting for a punchline. He is fighting to reclaim something that was taken from him before he was old enough to understand what it was. The episode does not offer a clean resolution. Peter's sister does not suddenly become a good person. There is no heartfelt apology or tearful reconciliation. She is who she is. And Peter has to figure out how to live with that, how to process years of pain that he has been burying under layers of stupidity and humour. This is the episode that makes you look at Peter differently. Every time he does something ridiculous, every time he makes a terrible decision, every time he acts like a child in a man's body, you can trace it back to this. Peter was not born this way, he was made this way, by a childhood that taught him the only safe thing to be was the joke, because the joke does not get hit. The lesson here is one that a lot of people carry with them their entire lives without ever putting it into words. Family trauma does not have an expiration date. The things that happened to you when you were 7 or 10 or 13 are still affecting your relationships, your decisions, and your self-image today. And the people around you, your spouse, your children, your friends, they are dealing with the ripple effects of pain they did not cause and might not even know about. Peter never talked about his sister before this episode. He never explained to Lois why he is the way he is. He just showed up every day as the loudest, most obnoxious version of himself, because that was the armor he built as a kid, and he never took it off. And Lois, for all her frustration with Peter over the years, finally gets to see what that armor was protecting. Standing up to your abuser is not about winning a fight. It is about refusing to let the pattern continue. Peter did not defeat his sister in some grand, dramatic fashion, but he stood up. He said no more. And even if nothing else changed, that moment of resistance was the first step toward breaking a cycle that had been running his life for decades. If you recognize yourself in Peter's story, if there is someone from your past whose voice still echoes in the way you make decisions or how you see yourself, know that you are not alone. And know that standing up, even imperfectly, even messily, is always worth it. Not because it fixes the past, but because it proves that the past does not get to write your future. Now let us shift to something warmer, because Family Guy also has things to teach us about love, and how the wrong kind of love can be just as damaging as no love at all. In Stewie Loves Lois, we see one of the most interesting character reversals in the entire series. Stewie Griffin, the baby genius who has spent countless episodes trying to kill his mother, suddenly adores her. Not begrudgingly, not strategically, with the kind of total, overwhelming, suffocating devotion that only a very small child can produce. The trigger is surprisingly small. Stewie is at the park with Lois when a dog attacks Rupert, his beloved teddy bear. Stewie calls out for help, and Lois jumps in. She fights the dog, retrieves Rupert, and when the bear is sadly ruined, she sits down and fixes him as best she can. She makes Stewie his favourite dinner, and something inside Stewie, something that has been buried under layers of patricidal schemes and British sarcasm, breaks open. He feels loved. Maybe for the first time, he actually lets himself feel it. From that moment on, Stewie cannot get enough of Lois. He follows her everywhere. He clings to her. He demands her attention constantly. He becomes the most devoted, most obsessive, most exhausting mama's boy in television history. Every waking moment is about Lois. Where is she? What is she doing? Can she hold him? Can she stay? Never leave. Never go anywhere without me. I need you. I need you. I need you. Lois is charmed at first. After years of Stewie plotting her death, his sudden affection is a welcome change. But the charm wears off fast. Because Stewie does not want a relationship with Lois. He wants ownership. He does not want her to be his mother. He wants her to be his entire world. And that is a weight no single person can carry. Lois starts to suffocate. Every room she walks into, Stewie is there. Every conversation she tries to have, Stewie interrupts. Every moment she tries to claim for herself, Stewie demands it back. His love is not love, it is a cage. And Lois, who genuinely wanted Stewie's affection, finds herself desperate to escape it. Eventually, Lois has to set boundaries. She has to tell Stewie no. She has to push him back. And when she does, Stewie reverts to his old self. The affection disappears. The plotting returns. The British accent gets sharper. He is back to being the Stewie who keeps Lois at arm's length because getting too close is terrifying. On the surface, this is a funny episode about a baby who flip-flops between loving and hating his mother. But underneath the comedy, it is a devastatingly accurate portrayal of what happens when someone who has never felt safe suddenly feels loved. Stewie's reaction to Lois's comfort is not abnormal. It is textbook. People who have been emotionally guarded their entire lives often respond to affection in one of two ways. They either run from it because it feels dangerous, or they consume it completely because they are terrified it will be taken away. Stewie went from Category A to Category B overnight, from trying to kill Lois to trying to merge with her. Neither extreme is healthy. Both are driven by the same root cause: fear. Stewie is afraid. He has always been afraid. His world domination schemes, his genius-level intellect, his cutting wit, all of it is armor. Just like Peter's, loudness is armor. The Griffin family is a household of people who are terrified of being vulnerable, and they each deal with that terror differently. Peter becomes a clown. Stewie becomes a villain. Brian becomes a pseudo-intellectual. Meg becomes invisible. And they all keep each other at exactly the distance that feels safe, which is always slightly too far. The lesson Stewie teaches us in this episode is that love without boundaries is not love. It is dependency. And dependency destroys the very connection it is trying to preserve. When Stewie grabbed onto Lois with both hands and refused to let go, he was not loving her. He was using her as a life raft. And the moment she tried to swim on her own, he treated it like abandonment. Real love requires space. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to let someone walk out of the room and believe they are coming back. Stewie could not do that because his entire life had taught him that the people around him were threats to be neutralized or resources to be exploited. He had never learned the middle ground. He had never learned that you can love someone and still let them breathe. If that sounds familiar, if you have ever been the person who holds too tight or the person being held too tight, this episode is for you. Love is not about possession. It is about presence, being there when it matters, and being secure enough to let someone exist apart from you when it does not. Make sure you are subscribed if you're still watching. We're past the halfway point now, and the lessons ahead are some of the deepest ones Family Guy has ever delivered. There is a relationship in Family Guy that does not get talked about enough, and it might be the most important one in the entire series. The friendship between Peter and Brian. On paper, these two should not be friends. Peter is crude, impulsive, and has the intellectual curiosity of a brick. Brian is pretentious, judgmental, and considers himself above the kind of behaviour Peter engages in daily. They are opposites in every way that seems to matter, but across hundreds of episodes, their friendship endures, not because they understand each other, but because they accept each other. There is an episode where Brian's drinking puts the family at risk, and Peter, instead of being angry, simply wants his old friend back. There is another where Peter and Brian have a falling out, and Peter admits that Brian is his best friend. Not Quagmire or Joe or Cleveland. Brian, the dog who judges him constantly. The dog who thinks he is smarter. The dog who would never choose Peter as a friend if given other options. Peter chooses Brian anyway. And Brian, for all his pretensions, chooses Peter too. He has had opportunities to leave. He could live on his own. He could find a more intellectually stimulating household. He could move in with one of his various love interests. But he stays. He stays with the family that makes him roll his eyes every single day. He stays with Peter, who embarrasses him and infuriates him and makes his life measurably harder, because underneath Brian's intellectual armour, he knows something that his pride would never let him say out loud. Peter makes him feel at home. This is what long-term friendship actually looks like. Not two people who are perfectly compatible. Not two people who agree on everything and never fight. It is two people who have seen each other at their absolute worst and decided, consciously and repeatedly, that the worst was not a deal breaker. Peter has seen Brian drunk, pathetic, dishonest, and broken. Brian has seen Peter stupid, reckless, cruel, and absurd. And neither one has ever permanently walked away. That is rare. In real life, friendships fracture over far less. People end decades-long relationships over political disagreements or social media arguments, or perceived slights that would have been forgotten in a week if anyone had the patience to wait. We live in a culture that encourages cutting people off at the first sign of conflict, that treats boundaries as walls instead of fences, that mistakes the comfort of agreement for the substance of connection. Peter and Brian disagree about everything, but they show up for each other when it counts. And that, in the end, is the only thing that matters. We should also talk about Quagmire for a moment. Glenn Quagmire is the character that most people write off as a one-note joke, the sexual deviant, the guy who says giggity, the neighbour whose behaviour would land him in prison in any world that was not animated. But Family Guy has given Quagmire more depth than the surface suggests. There is a moment in the series where Quagmire discovers he has a daughter he never knew about, and the man who has spent years as a walking innuendo suddenly has to confront what it means to be responsible for another human being. He does not handle it perfectly. He struggles, he makes mistakes, but he tries. The instinct to care for his child is real, even in a man whose entire identity has been built around carelessness. There is another episode where Quagmire tells Brian exactly what he thinks of him. He calls Brian out for being a fraud, a poser, a bad friend, and a worse person. It is one of the most brutal monologues in the history of the show, and the reason it hits so hard is that Quagmire is right about everything. Brian has been coasting on charm and articulation for years, and Quagmire, the character nobody takes seriously, is the one who has the clarity and the courage to say it. Quagmire teaches us that people are more than their most visible trait. The class clown might be the most observant person in the room. The person everyone underestimates might see things more clearly than anyone else. We sort people into categories based on first impressions and then refuse to update those categories no matter how much evidence contradicts them. Quagmire is always going to be the giggity guy, but he's also a pilot, a loyal friend, a protective father, and occasionally the most honest person on the show. Do not reduce people to their most obvious characteristic. There is always more underneath, always. And now let us talk about something that runs through every single lesson we have discussed tonight. The idea that being uncomfortable is where growth lives. Peter is uncomfortable telling the truth, so he lies and everything gets worse. Brian is uncomfortable being average, so he cheats and his integrity collapses. Meg is uncomfortable standing up for herself, so she stays silent for years, and the resentment nearly destroys her family. Stewie is uncomfortable being vulnerable, so he builds an accent and a persona and an arsenal of weapons to keep the world at arm's length. Every lesson we have discussed tonight, every single one, traces back to a moment where a character had to choose between comfort and growth. And the lesson is always the same. Comfort is the enemy. Not physical comfort, not the kind of comfort you feel right now, lying in bed or sitting in the dark listening to this. That kind of comfort is good. That kind of comfort is what you need and deserve. The comfort that is the enemy is the emotional kind. The comfort of avoidance, the comfort of pretending, the comfort of choosing the familiar path because the unfamiliar one feels too scary. Every meaningful moment in Family Guy, every lesson that actually sticks, comes from a character who was forced out of their comfort zone and discovered something about themselves that they could not have discovered any other way. Peter discovered honesty when he was forced into a courtroom. Brian discovered integrity when he was forced into an exam. Meg discovered her strength when she was forced into a hurricane. Stewie discovered his vulnerability when he was forced into a therapist's office. And all of them discovered the depth of their love for Brian when they were forced to live without him. The discomfort was the teacher, every time. So if there is something in your life that you have been avoiding because it feels uncomfortable, a conversation you need to have, a truth you need to tell, a change you need to make, consider this your sign. Not from a motivational poster or an Instagram quote. From a cartoon family in Rhode Island, who have spent 25 years demonstrating, in the most absurd and roundabout way possible, that the things you're afraid of are usually the things that will set you free. The discomfort passes, the growth stays. The Griffins prove this every episode, even when they do not mean to. The next lesson comes from an episode that Family Guy treated with the kind of care and intention that most people do not associate with this show. It was the 300th episode. 300 episodes of cutaway gags, giant chicken fights, and Quagmire saying giggity. And for this milestone, the show made the boldest creative choice it has ever made. It put Stewie Griffin in a therapist's office and let him talk. Just talk. For the entire episode, send in Stewie, please. Season 16, episode 12. And like the Bank Vault episode, this one breaks every rule the show normally follows. There is one setting, one conversation, no cutaway gags, no B-plots about Peter getting a new job or Chris falling for the wrong girl. Just Stewie sitting across from a child psychologist named Dr. Cecil Pritchfield, having the most honest conversation of his life. It starts the way these things always start, with deflection. Stewie is sent to the doctor's office after pushing another student down the stairs at school. He walks in with his usual swagger, his British accent sharp, his wit deployed like a weapon. He makes jokes, he analyses the doctor's personal life with surgical precision, deducing details about the man's relationship and history from nothing more than the objects in his office. Stewie is performing. He is doing what he always does, being the smartest person in the room so that nobody looks too closely at what is underneath. But Dr. Pritchfield is not Peter. He is not Lois. He is not Brian. He is not someone Stewie can manipulate or dazzle or dismiss. The doctor listens, he watches, and he waits, because he knows what Stewie is doing, and he knows that eventually the performance will run out of energy. Slowly, the conversation shifts. The doctor asks about Stewie's loneliness. Stewie resists. The doctor asks about his anxiety. Stewie deflects. The doctor mentions almost casually that he has noticed Stewie's accent, and that observation, so simple and so obvious, cracks something open. Stewie has always spoken with a British accent. Since the very first episode, it is one of his defining characteristics, Rex Harrison in a baby's body, as Seth MacFarlane has described the voice. The accent is part of who Stewie is, or at least it is part of who Stewie pretends to be. Because in this episode, Stewie drops the accent. He speaks in his real voice, an American voice, a child's voice, small and uncertain and completely different from the commanding British tenor he's been using for 300 episodes. And the moment he does, everything about him changes. His posture softens, his wit dulls, his armour falls away. For the first time in the history of the series, you are seeing the real Stewie Griffin. Not the genius, not the villain, not the world conqueror, just a scared, lonely little kid who has been pretending to be someone else for so long that even he has trouble remembering which version is real. Stewie admits it all. The accent is a defense mechanism. The world domination schemes, the elaborate weapons, the intellectual superiority, all of it is armor he built because being himself felt too dangerous. He admits that he plucks his hair from anxiety. He talks about his loneliness at school. He talks about his confusion, about his own identity. He opens up about things he has never told anyone, not even Brian. The doctor shares his own story. He tells Stewie about growing up during the London Blitz, losing his parents, being passed from home to home until he ended up in an orphanage. He talks about how he compensated by becoming someone he was not, by building a persona that would protect him from the world. He tells Stewie this because he recognises in Stewie the same survival strategy he used himself. For a few minutes, sitting in that office, Stewie is real. Completely, vulnerably, terrifyingly real. And the question hangs in the air, is he going to stay this way? Is 300 episodes worth of character development finally going to result in Stewie Griffin becoming the person he actually is instead of the character he performs? The answer is no. Stewie puts the accent back on. He chooses the mask. He looks at the doctor, and you can see the decision happening in real time. Being real felt good. It felt honest, but it also felt exposed. And Stewie decides that he is not ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He would rather be the pretend version of himself that feels safe than the real version that feels naked. The episode ends on a dark note. The doctor begins having a heart attack, and Stewie, who has just shared his deepest secrets with this man, who has been more honest with this stranger than he's ever been with anyone, lets him die. Because Dr. Pritchfield is the only person who has seen through the mask, and Stewie cannot let that knowledge exist in the world. The doctor's phone rings as he collapses. It is his husband, calling to demand a divorce, and Stewie walks out. This is not a happy ending. It is not supposed to be. It is an honest ending about what happens when you get close to being vulnerable and then decide you're not ready. We have all been Stewie, maybe not in such a dramatic way, but we have all built personas that protect us. The version of yourself you present at work is not the same version your friends see. The version your friends see is not the same version that exists at 3 a.m. when you cannot sleep. We curate ourselves constantly, choosing which parts to show and which parts to hide, tailoring our personality to the situation and the audience. Stewie's accent is just a more literal version of what we all do. We all have an accent, a way of speaking, of carrying ourselves, of presenting our identity that is at least partially constructed. The question is not whether the mask exists. Everyone has one. The question is whether you know you're wearing it. Stewie knows. That is what makes this episode so brilliant and so sad. He is not oblivious to his own performance. He understands exactly what he's doing and why. He made a conscious choice to build the accent, the persona, the character. And in the therapist's office, he makes an equally conscious choice to put it back on. The lesson is nuanced, and it refuses to judge Stewie's decision. Because sometimes you're not ready to be vulnerable. Sometimes the world has given you very good reasons to keep your armor on. And choosing to protect yourself is not weakness, it is survival. What matters is that you know the mask is there, that you're honest with yourself, even if you are not ready to be honest with the world. Stewie left that office still pretending to be someone else, but he left knowing that the pretending was a choice. And knowing that means that someday, if he decides to, he can make a different one. That is what 300 episodes of character development looks like. Not a triumphant revelation, not a dramatic transformation, just a quiet, private acknowledgement that the person you show the world is not all of who you are, and that underneath the performance, the real you is still there, waiting. If that resonates with you, sit with it. There is no rush. We are here all night, and when you're ready, we have 2 more lessons to go. The second to last lesson Family Guy teaches us is about something we have all done at some point in our lives, even if we would never admit it. Trying to force a relationship to work through desperate measures instead of just saying what we actually feel. Stewie is Enceinte is one of those episodes that sounds absolutely insane when you describe the plot out loud. Stewie Griffin, feeling that his friendship with Brian is drifting apart, decides to fix the problem by impregnating himself with Brian's DNA and having their baby. Yes, that is what happens. And yes, it is exactly as bizarre as it sounds. But underneath the absurdity is an emotion that everyone who has ever watched a friendship fade will recognize immediately. The setup is simple and painfully relatable. Stewie wants to hang out with Brian. Brian is busy. Stewie tries again. Brian blows him off again. It is not malicious. Brian is not trying to hurt Stewie. He is just living his life, doing Brian things, being a dog who drinks martinis and pretends to write novels. But for Stewie, who we just learned in the previous lesson, considers Brian the only person in the world he truly cares about. Every rejection feels like the beginning of the end. Stewie watches Joe and Bonnie Swanson with their baby Susie. He sees how the baby keeps them connected, how having a child together creates a bond that cannot be casually broken. And in his mind, Warped by genius and desperation, a plan forms. If he and Brian had a baby together, Brian could never drift away. They would be linked forever. So Stewie builds a device. He collects Brian's DNA. He injects it into himself, and he becomes pregnant. Now the show plays this for comedy, and there is plenty to laugh at. Stewie going through morning sickness, Stewie's body changing, the absurdity of a baby being pregnant with a dog baby. But there is something underneath the jokes that is genuinely heartbreaking. Stewie is not doing this because he is insane. He is doing this because he is terrified. He has identified the single most important relationship in his life, and he can feel it slipping away. And instead of sitting Brian down and saying, "I miss you, I feel like we are not as close as we used to be, and I am scared of losing you," Stewie does what people who are afraid of vulnerability always do. He takes drastic, complicated, over-engineered action to avoid having a simple, honest conversation. Think about how often we do this in real life. Instead of telling someone we miss them, we create elaborate reasons to see them. Instead of saying, "I feel disconnected from you," we plan expensive trips or grand gestures or dramatic displays of affection, all designed to rekindle something that could have been fixed with 5 minutes of honest communication. Instead of admitting that we are afraid, we build Rube Goldberg machines of avoidance, complex structures that accomplish nothing except delaying the moment when we have to be real. Stewie's pregnancy forces him and Brian to spend time together. The plan works in the most superficial sense. Brian has to be involved because this is technically his child. They are talking again. They are in each other's lives, but it is not genuine. It is manufactured. The connection Stewie wanted was not created by the baby. It was created by Stewie's manipulation. And manufactured connection is not connection at all. It is obligation wearing a mask. The episode does not end with a neat bow. It does not end with Stewie and Brian having the honest conversation they should have had from the beginning. It ends with the consequences of Stewie's desperation playing out in ways that are complicated and messy and unresolved. Because that is what happens when you try to engineer closeness instead of earning it. The lesson here is about the difference between presence and proximity. You can be physically close to someone every single day and still be emotionally miles apart. Stewie wanted Brian's presence, his attention, his commitment. But instead of asking for those things directly, he tried to create a situation where Brian had no choice but to provide them. And forced closeness is not the same as chosen closeness. The people who matter in your life are not the ones who stay because they have to. They are the ones who stay because they want to. And the only way to know if someone wants to stay is to give them the freedom to leave and see what they do. Stewie could not accept that. He needed a guarantee. He needed certainty. And in trying to create that certainty, he built something that was never going to satisfy him because it was not real. If you have ever caught yourself planning some grand gesture when what you really needed to do was send a text that said, "Hey, I miss you," this lesson is for you. The conversation is always simpler than we make it. The fix is always smaller than we think it needs to be. And the people who are worth keeping in your life are usually the ones who would respond to that text in seconds. Stop building machines. Start having conversations. The connection you are looking for is not complicated. You are making it complicated because being direct feels scarier than being clever. But clever is lonely. And direct, even when it is terrifying, is the only thing that builds something real. Now we have arrived at the final lesson, the one that brings everything together. And it takes us back to the moment when the Griffin family was broken and the smallest member of the household moved heaven and earth to put it back together. We also need to give Lois her due, because across every lesson we have talked about tonight, Lois has been there, not as the hero, not as the villain, as the constant. Lois Griffin married a man who regularly destroys property, commits accidental felonies, and once declared their house a sovereign nation. She raises 3 children, one of whom is a literal genius building weapons in his crib. She manages the family finances. She cooks, she cleans, she mediates. And she does all of this while Peter consistently makes her life harder in ways that would have ended most marriages before the second commercial break. But Lois stays, and the show has explored why in ways that go beyond simple loyalty or sitcom convention. Lois stays because she chose Peter, not because he was the best option, not because she could not do better. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, is one of the wealthiest men in Rhode Island. Lois grew up with money, privilege, and options. She chose Peter deliberately, against the wishes of her family, because she saw something in him that nobody else did. What she saw was sincerity. Peter is many things. He is stupid. He is reckless. He is selfish, but he is never fake. Peter Griffin might be the most authentic person on the show. He does not pretend to be smarter than he is. He does not hide behind intellectual facades like Brian or emotional armor like Stewie. He walks through life as exactly who he is, without apology and without filter. And for Lois, who grew up in a world of artificial politeness and inherited wealth and people who said one thing and meant another, Peter's sincerity felt like freedom. Lois teaches us that choosing someone is not a one-time decision. It is a commitment you renew every single day, in the face of evidence that sometimes makes you question your judgment. She stood in that courtroom in the very first episode and said she would always stand by Peter, and she has, through welfare fraud, through amnesia, through time travel disasters, through Peter accidentally creating international incidents. She has stayed not because she is weak or because she has no alternatives, but because she made a promise and she meant it. That kind of commitment is rare. We live in a world that encourages optimization in every area of life. If your phone is not the latest model, upgrade. If your job is not the highest paying, switch. If your partner is not perfect, there is an app for that. The idea of choosing someone imperfect and recommitting to that choice every single day runs counter to everything modern culture tells us about how to live. But Lois proves that commitment to an imperfect person is not settling. It is strength. It is the recognition that nobody is going to be exactly what you want all the time, and that the willingness to stay and work and forgive and adapt is more valuable than the fantasy of finding someone who never disappoints you. Peter disappoints Lois constantly, and Lois disappoints Peter sometimes too, but they are still together after 25 years and 450 episodes, and that counts for something. Circling back to where we started tonight, the bank vault, Brian and Stewie, a gun and a bottle of scotch and a conversation that changed everything. When Stewie told Brian that maybe making someone else happy is enough, he was not being sentimental. He was being scientific. He was observing the data of their friendship and drawing the only conclusion that the evidence supported. Brian's happiest moments in the entire series are not when he publishes a book or impresses a woman or wins an argument. They are when he makes Stewie laugh, when he reads to him, when they go on adventures together, when they sit in a room and just exist in each other's company. Brian's purpose was never going to come from a bestseller list or a degree or a romantic partner. It was always going to come from the same place it has always been. Right next to Stewie, on the couch, in the car, in a bank vault, wherever they happen to be, together. And that is not a small thing. That is everything. Purpose is not something you find. It is someone you find it with. Brian searched the entire world for meaning, and it was sleeping in the room down the hall the entire time. Stewie searched for power and control and world domination, and it was sitting next to him on the couch the entire time. They both had what they needed. They just had to stop looking everywhere else, long enough to notice. If you're searching for your purpose tonight, consider the possibility that you are overcomplicating it. Look at the people around you. Look at who shows up for you and who you show up for. Look at the relationship that makes your life make sense even when everything else is chaos. That might be it. That might be the whole answer. It is not glamorous. It will not make a good motivational poster, but it is real. And real as Brian learned in that vault, is the only thing that keeps the gun in the deposit box. We have been at this for a while now. We have talked about fear and honesty and ego and grief and masks and love and what it means to show up for the people who need you. And all of these lessons, every single one, converges in the final story we are going to tell tonight. It is the story of a baby who broke the rules of time and space because he refused to accept a world without his best friend in it. Christmas Guy, Season 12, Episode 8. The episode that brought Brian Griffin back from the dead. We already talked about Brian's death. The car, the vet's office, the silence, the family's grief, and Stewie's guilt over destroying the time machine that could have saved him. We talked about Vinny, the replacement dog, and how Stewie could not accept him because acceptance felt like betrayal. But what we did not talk about yet is what Stewie did next, and what it teaches us about legacy, love, and the lengths people will go to when they refuse to let the story end this way. After Brian's death, the Griffin family tries to move forward. Peter goes back to work. Lois holds the house together. Chris and Meg adjust. Vinny fills the empty space as best he can. He is a good dog, he is kind, he is helpful, but he is not Brian. And for Stewie, that difference is the only thing that matters. The family goes to the Christmas carnival. Carter Pewterschmidt, Lois's father, has cancelled it because he hates the holiday. Peter, in classic Peter fashion, tries everything to get Carter to change his mind. He tries fake story letters, eggnog, and various other schemes. Nothing works, but when Peter makes a tactless remark that hits a nerve, Carter suddenly reverses his position and the carnival comes back. Lights, decorations, holiday music, all the trappings of joy. But Stewie cannot feel any of it. There is a moment at the carnival where Stewie sits on Santa's lap. Santa asks him what he wants for Christmas, and Stewie, who has asked for weapons and world domination and sophisticated technology for his entire life, says one word: Brian. He just wants Brian back. Santa cannot deliver that. Nobody can. Brian is gone, and the time machine is destroyed, and the parts cannot be replaced. This is the reality that Stewie has been living in for weeks, a reality without his best friend, without the only person who ever truly understood him, without the one relationship that made his life make sense. Vinny tries. He dresses up like Brian. He puts on a terrible impression, pretending to be an intellectual, pretending to be a writer. He gives Stewie the gifts Brian would have given, and Stewie appreciates the effort. He genuinely does. But pretending someone else is the person you lost does not fill the hole. It just reminds you of its shape. And then Stewie sees something at the mall, a detail so small that anyone else would have missed it entirely. He sees himself, his past self, from weeks earlier, buying a toy that Stewie purchased just before Brian was killed. And in that moment, Stewie's genius kicks in. Not the destructive genius, not the weapons-building genius, the desperate, love-fueled, nothing-else-matters genius. If his past self is here, at this moment, then his past self still has the time return pad from the time machine. The machine itself was destroyed, but the pad, the small handheld device that allows travel between time periods, still exists in the past. If Stewie can get his hands on that pad, he can go back and save Brian. Stewie tells Vinny what he needs to do, and here is where Vinny proves that even a replacement can be extraordinary. Vinny does not hesitate. He does not argue. He does not point out that helping Stewie means erasing himself from the timeline, because if Stewie goes back and saves Brian, then the family never goes to the pet store. They never find Vinny. He never becomes part of their lives. By helping Stewie, Vinny is agreeing to his own erasure. Vinny helps anyway, because he understands what Stewie needs, and because love, real love, sometimes means stepping aside so that someone else can have the person they cannot live without. Stewie gets the pad from his past self. He enters the time coordinates. He travels back to the moment before the car hits Brian, and he pushes Brian out of the way. Brian is alive, standing in the street, confused and blinking, and Stewie grabs him and holds on to him like the world tried to take him away, and Stewie said no. The family's whole again. Brian comes home. Stewie has his friend back, and somewhere in a pet store that the Griffins will never visit, a dog named Vinny waits for an owner who will never come. This story is about legacy, but not the kind of legacy that gets written in history books or carved on gravestones. It is about the kind of legacy that exists in the space between two people who matter to each other. Brian's legacy was not his unfinished novels, or his political opinions, or his failed relationships. His legacy was the impact he had on one person who could not imagine the world without him. Stewie did not break the laws of physics to save a hero. He did not travel through time to prevent a war or change the course of history. He went back for his friend. One friend. Because that one friend was worth more to Stewie than every other achievement, every invention, every scheme he had ever concocted. The genius who wanted to conquer the world discovered that the world only mattered because Brian was in it. And that is the lesson. Your legacy is not your accomplishments. It is not your career or your bank account or your social media following. Your legacy is the people who would travel through time for you, the ones who would break the rules, sacrifice their own comfort, and risk everything to keep you in their lives. Think about who those people are for you, and think about whether you are that person for someone else. Because the car comes out of nowhere. We talked about that earlier. You do not get a warning. You do not get to schedule the goodbye. The only thing you can control is how much you show up before the moment comes, whether you said what needed to be said, whether you were present when it mattered, whether the people who love you know that you love them back. Stewie got a second chance. The show gave him a miracle. But the lesson is not about miracles. The lesson is that Stewie was willing to tear apart the fabric of reality for one person. That level of devotion does not appear overnight. It is built slowly, over years, through small moments of connection and honesty and just being there, through reading books in a bank vault and travelling through time together and arguing about stupid things and forgiving each other when it matters. Brian's life was saved because he had spent years earning the kind of love that does not accept loss as final. That is legacy. Not what you leave behind when you're gone, but what you build while you're here that makes someone refuse to let you go. Family Guy has been on the air since January 31st, 1999. Seth MacFarlane created it when he was 25 years old, working out of a cramped office with a $50,000 budget for a 15-minute pilot. That pilot aired after Super Bowl 33 and drew 22 million viewers. The show was cancelled twice. It came back twice. It has been running for more than 25 years and has produced somewhere around 450 episodes, depending on who is counting and whether you include the streaming specials. In that time, the Griffins have taught us things that we did not expect to learn from a show about a fat guy who fights chickens. Peter taught us that honesty, even late honesty, costs less than the lie. Brian taught us that intelligence without purpose is just loneliness wearing a turtleneck. Stewie taught us that the masks we wear protect us and imprison us at the same time. Lois taught us that strength often looks like patience, and sometimes looks like standing in front of a church and refusing to be ashamed. Meg taught us that the person who carries the most weight might be the strongest one in the room. And together, this messy, dysfunctional, occasionally terrible family taught us that showing up for the people you love is the only thing that actually matters. Not showing up perfectly, not showing up with the right words or the right plan, just showing up. The Griffins are not role models, they are mirrors. They show us our worst impulses, and occasionally, when the writing is at its best, our best ones too. They lie and cheat and sabotage each other and say horrible things, but they also sacrifice for each other and forgive each other and show up at courtrooms and Christmas carnivals and bank vaults because that is what family does. Not because they are good at it, but because they keep trying. If you have made it this far, you learnt something tonight. Maybe it was about facing your problems when they are small. Maybe it was about the difference between presence and proximity. Maybe it was about the gun in the deposit box, and how sometimes purpose is just being important to one person. Or maybe you fell asleep 45 minutes ago, and that is perfectly fine too. Either way, the Griffins will be here when you come back. They have been here since 1999. They are not going anywhere. If you enjoyed tonight's video, subscribe to the channel. We do this regularly, long-form content designed to give you something real to think about while you drift off. Hit the bell so you do not miss the next one. And leave a comment telling us which lesson hit hardest. We read every single one. Good night. Sleep well, and remember, the people who love you would travel through time for you. Make sure they know you would do the same. And one last thing before you drift off. The show that taught us all of this almost never existed. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11th, 2001. A hangover and a miscommunication with his travel agent caused him to miss the flight by 10 minutes. That plane was flown into the World Trade Center. If MacFarlane had made that flight, there would be no Family Guy past season 3. No Bank Vault episode, no Brian's death and resurrection, no Stewie in the therapist's chair. Nearly 20 years of lessons, gone before they were ever written. Sometimes the universe decides that someone has more to say, and sometimes the proof that your life has meaning is simply the fact that you're still here to live it.